Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating conceptual framework by the author Xu Feng. It's all about how to tackle those seemingly impossible problems we all face. You know the feeling, right? When you're completely stuck, and no matter how hard you overthink or analyze a situation, the solution just utterly refuses to present itself. Well, according to the source material we're unpacking today, you might just be looking in the completely wrong place. You're looking inside the problem when the solution, it actually exists on the outside. Let's explore what that really means. All right, let's jump right in with a pretty compelling thought experiment from the author. I want you to picture this. Imagine you and a group of people are living in a gloomy, dark, incredibly damp cave. It's just a miserable environment all around. Your main goal is to figure out how to make this cave bright, sunny, and comfortable. So, how do you actually do it? Do you sit there and study the damp walls? Do you research the nature of darkness? Do you work up a sweat sweeping the dirt floor? Xu Feng argues that doing all of that, studying, researching, striving, while still sitting inside the cave, is frankly completely futile. You're basically just spinning your wheels trying to fix an inherently broken environment from the inside out. The author argues that the only real, tangible solution is to just step entirely outside. The absolutely best way to fix the problem of living in a dark cave isn't to sit there contemplating it. It's simply stepping out into the bright spring scenery, the vast territory, and the fresh air. The problem literally vanishes immediately, not because you somehow solved the concept of darkness, but because you transcended it. Moving into Section 1, History Outside the Cave, Testing the Metaphor in the Real World. To really ground this philosophy, the author points to a wild historical contrast. So it's August 1896, and China is largely a society of mud houses, ox carts, and dirt roads. Household electricity just wasn't a thing. But at that exact same time, the Chinese diplomat Li Hongzhang actually visits the United States. And by stepping outside his geographical and cultural cave, he's suddenly looking at skyscrapers, early cars, electric indoor lighting, and men in modern suits. The text highlights that this contrast was just absolutely immense. If he had never ventured abroad, he never would have grasped the sheer scale of the technological gap. He literally had to step outside the boundary of his own nation to understand the reality of his own situation. Fast forward a bit, and we see this dynamic play out again decades later, but with even higher stakes. In 1978, China's per capita GDP was sitting at a staggering low of just $156. Now, to put that into perspective, even in the world's poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa at that exact same time, the per capita GDP was significantly higher at $490. And the United States? It was sitting at $10,600. The author uses these stark numbers to show that a whole nation can operate exactly like that group of people living in a cave, completely unaware of the vast, prosperous world developing just outside their narrow viewpoint. Changing that trajectory was going to require a massive shift in thinking. So faced with those stark numbers, what do? Well, according to the text, Chinese leaders realized they couldn't just study development ideas from inside their own isolated cave anymore. They had to decisively abandon those isolationist policies. They started sending government officials out across the globe to investigate developed Western countries, which broadened horizons and opened minds. This direct physical act of stepping outside initiated the famous period of reform and opening up, leading directly to over 30 years of rapid economic growth. The big takeaway here is clear. Trying to fix an economy with $156 per capita GDP using only internal logic? Completely impossible. The solution demanded an external perspective. To bring this concept all the way up to the present day, the author shares a super practical, personal anecdote. 10 minutes. That is literally all the time it took the author to register a company in a foreign country. He points out that he didn't have to navigate some maze of complex bureaucracy, he didn't have to bribe anyone, and he didn't need to rely on personal connections, all things that might be standard operating procedure inside a different administrative cave. He just picked a name, paid, and got his documents. It's a really simple story, but man, it powerfully showcases the effortless efficiency you can discover when you just step outside the boundaries of a flawed system. All right, Section 2, Humanity's Unsolved Problems. Zooming out to the global scale. Now, the text pivots and asks a really profound, heavy question. Why is human history just constantly filled with suffering? I mean, for thousands of years, our shared story on Earth has been defined almost entirely by distress, pain, conflict, struggle, oppression, anxiety, and fear. The author challenges us to think about how incredibly few people throughout history have actually lived truly joyful, free, and blessed lives. It's this massive, unsolved problem that affects literally all of humanity, and it's basically been unresolved for millennia. And here's the kicker, a major critique of our greatest minds. We usually look up to high-ranking officials in the UN, presidents, great historical thinkers, and even these modern internet masters to solve our global issues, right? But the text argues that despite their high status and all their intellect, they're all still just sitting there pondering from within the exact same cave. They're trying to solve Earth's systemic problems using Earth systemic logic. And if we go back to the core philosophy here, you simply cannot solve the darkness of the cave by studying the darkness of the cave. To actually solve this, the source proposes a massive, and I mean massive, zoom out. It introduces this unique cosmic concept from the author called the thousand-year world planet. The author suggests that to fix humanity, we literally need to step completely out of Earth's cognitive boundaries, look to the stars, and follow a brand new extraterrestrial way of life. The whole theory is that by stepping entirely outside the human experience as we know it, these seemingly impossible problems like war, poverty, and suffering would suddenly become clear and easily solvable. Again, just like stepping out of that damp cave and into the spring sun. Which brings us to Section 3, Expanding Cognitive Boundaries, the epistemology of stepping out. So how do we actually do this? Well, the author lays out a really specific, fascinating progression for seeking knowledge. The golden rule here is simple. Never seek solutions exclusively within your own circle of cognition. If a problem can't be solved using the framework of, say, Christianity, you have to step outside that boundary and look for answers in Buddhism. If that doesn't work, step out into Islam, then Taoism. If religious or philosophical frameworks fail, you expand out into the frontiers of science. And if science hits a brick wall, you just keep expanding outward into theology and metaphysics. The point is, problems that feel totally impossible to solve within your specific discipline might have been solved centuries ago by someone operating in a completely different cognitive circle. And finally, Section 4, the cost of isolation. Why we must keep stepping outside. Check out this super bold quote from an article written by the author. When you think you're right, you're already wrong. It perfectly sums up the sheer danger of closing ourselves off. Think about it. The absolute moment you believe your current circle of knowledge holds all the answers, you have effectively sealed the entrance to your cave. You've stopped looking for the sunlight. The source is pretty clear on this. Assuming we are entirely right means we're basically doomed to just loop the same mistakes from the past, trapping ourselves in a continuous cycle of suffering. The stakes here? They seriously couldn't be higher. This trajectory of isolationism is a steep, slippery slope. It usually starts innocently enough. Just closing our eyes and ears to external info, maybe shouting some empty slogans while ignoring the rest of the world. But the source explicitly warns that this path inevitably leads straight to ignorance and backwardness, which quickly descends into barbarism. And the final destination? The author flat out states that refusing to step outside the cave ultimately culminates in extinction. It is a really harsh, wake-up call warning about why we absolutely must maintain an open mind and continuously explore outward. To wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final, provocative question. What cave of cognition are you currently trapped in? Seriously, think about it. Whether it's a bottleneck at work, a frustrating personal relationship, or just your general worldview, where in your life are you stubbornly staring at the damp walls, just hoping for a solution to magically appear? Because if we go by Shufeng's framework that we've unpacked today, the answer absolutely isn't going to be found by looking harder at the problem itself. It's time to find the exit, step outside your boundaries, and finally feel the sunlight. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.